Now we're going to taste a port wine. This is another classic oxidative style. And just as in the case with sherry, some ports are oxidatively aged, others aren't. But it is one of the key, like the anchor wines of this style. Port wines come from the Douro Valley in northern Portugal, and it is probably the most beautiful wine region in the world. And I've been to Alsace twice, and that's probably the runner-up, but I still think that the Douro Valley has it. And they make still wines too. They've been trying to pivot towards still wines as ports have lost market share over the years. But port wine is really what it's all about. So it's a sweet, fortified red wine. Now there's white port, but let's not talk about it. Let's just pretend no one ever tried that. And it's been around for quite a long time. It's inspired a lot of lookalikes. There are port-style wines made in California, Australia, South Africa, all over the world, because that style of wine does appeal to a lot of people as an after-dinner drink, which is primarily what port is. So it's a red wine. It's typically a blended style. There are a lot of port varieties. Occasionally you'll get something that's like 100% Touriga Nacional, which is sort of the anchor varietal for port. But typically it's blended across vineyards, across grape varieties, thank you. And it's fermented fast and hot because you want maximum extraction. Unlike sherry, which is fermented dry and then fortified, with port, you actually halt the fermentation by adding grape spirit. So you want to maximize extraction of color, tannin, and flavor as much as possible. So really warm ferments, sometimes in tanks, sometimes in lagares, which are these traditional open vats, or people are, you might see pictures of people stomping on the grapes. That's to aid in the extraction of tannin and color. And then once the fortification occurs, then the wine is ready to age. It ages in casks, so usually large format, older oak barrels. And from that point, it just depends. There are different styles of ports. So there are ruby ports, there are vintage ports, there are late bottled vintage ports, and those are all aged conventionally in barrel. So there'll be the typical kind of very, very mild oxidative development that you would get in the aging of a typical red wine, which is to say you have softening and integration of the tannin, but not really oxidative character developing. And then they'll go into bottle, and they could be consumed fairly young or aged a long time in the case of vintage port. However, the alternative to that are the family of tawny ports, and those are oxidatively aged, and that can be done in one of two different ways. More entry-level commercial tawny ports are, they're usually lighter styles of wine, maybe younger vineyards, fruit with not as much color potential. It could be just less concentrated fruit from vineyards that are like, more entry-level. And they tend to be, they have shorter extraction times. And when they're aged in like warmer rooms, warmer aging facilities to speed up the aging process. Because heat hastens the effects of oxygen. Time, increases the effects of oxygen. But if you heat up wine, then it's going to oxidize faster. You're going to get that oxidative development faster. So there's the commercial styles. You can see these tawny ports everywhere that are fairly inexpensive, and they're just made in a quick-to-market kind of style. But the traditional tawny port is a port that's deep in color, highly extracted, just like the other styles, but it's aged slowly over a long period of time. And we have what are called ports with an age indication, 10-year-old tawnies, 20-year-old tawnies. There are also 40-year-old tawnies. And these are wines that are carefully aged in a controlled setting for a long time. They're still in cask, but there's some ullage, some space in that barrel, and it's also just a slow process. Oftentimes, as those barrels get older, the casks get older, the grain of the wood opens up a little bit, you get a little bit more intrusion of oxygen. And slowly the wines lighten up in color, the tannin softens, you get sediment dropping out of the wine, which may or may not show up in the bottle, and you get the development of these very rich characters, nutty, toffee, just like we tasted before.